Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flight Lieutenant Rebecca Penreath. We warmly welcome the family of Lieutenant Frederick William Morris, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 Australian men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament. Flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Frederick William Morris. Frederick William Morris was born on the 22nd of December 1913 in Muswellbrook, New South Wales, the eldest of 5 children, born to grazier James Hubert Morris and his wife Gladys Adeline. By the time of the Second World War, he was living in the nearby town of Denman, working as a grazier and horsebreaker. Frederick Morris enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 28th of May 1941. He was assigned to the newly raised 2nd 13th Battalion and commenced a short period of training in Australia, during which time he was promoted to acting Lance Corporal. He embarked for active service in Sydney in October, sailing with the rest of the 20th Brigade for the Middle East. Lance Corporal Morris arrived in Egypt in November 1940 and was immediately sent to hospital, suffering from measles caught during his voyage. He remained in hospital until early December, rejoining his unit later that month at camp in Palestine. In March of 1941, Morris's unit moved to Cyrenaica to replace members of the 6th Division who were being sent to Greece. Morris was appointed acting Lance Corporal, just as Allied units were being forced to fall back to the port city Tobruk, owing to a major push by Axis forces, which had become known as the Benghazi Handicap. It was not long until Morris's 2nd 13th Battalion was drawn into the fighting, when it was attacked by a force of some 3,000 men at Urajima on the 4th of April. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, it was forced to withdraw from its thinly held position before the men were picked up by trucks and taken behind lines to rest. A few days later, on the 9th of April, Morris and his comrades were in Tobruk, where they were joined by the rest of the 9th Division under siege from Axis forces. Morris was promoted to sergeant in June as his unit continued to defend the city under increasingly difficult conditions. Morris was wounded in action during a patrol outside Tobruk before being evacuated for treatment. He rejoined his unit at the end of August 1941 and remained at Tobruk until the evacuation in December. By July of 1942, the situation in North Africa had continued to deteriorate as Axis forces pushed forward, reaching El Alamein some 112 kilometres from Alexandria. The 9th Division was rushed from Syria to hold the northern sector around Tel Elisa. The Australians held these positions over the next few months as a major counter-offensive was prepared. In October, Morris contracted hepatitis and was hospitalised. As a result, he missed the fighting during the Second Battle of El Alamein, in which the Australians suffered some 6,000 casualties. By the time Morris rejoined the 2nd 13th, it was faced with a new threat of war in the Pacific. He and his comrades spent Christmas in the Middle East before returning to Sydney in January 1943 to face Japanese forces. After disembarking Australia in February, Morris and his comrades were granted leave before undertaking jungle training on the Atherton tablelands in Queensland. During this period, Morris was mentioned in dispatches for distinguished service during his time in North Africa. Morris embarked for service in Papua and New Guinea at the end of July 1943 and arrived in Milne Bay a few days later. His unit carried out jungle operations until the fall of Lae in September, after which it landed at Finschhaven to defend against enemy counterattacks. In November, Morris returned to Australia to train new reinforcements. he was commissioned to the rank of lieutenant in February 1944 before being transferred to the 2nd 6th Battalion. Morris returned to New Guinea with his new unit, disembarking at Aitape in early December, where his battalion was involved in patrols of the Torricelli and Alexander mountain ranges. It was during this course of duty that Lieutenant Morris was killed in action by the enemy near Imbe on the 9th of March, 1945. Morris was later buried by his comrades. Today, his remains lie at Lay Cemetery beneath the inscription chosen by his parents: loved son of Mr. and Mrs. Morris of Denman, New South Wales. He was 31 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Frederick William Morris, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If able, please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We hope you all have a very pleasant evening. Thank you.